Now we're going to talk about modeling a humanoid head. And because of our time constraints in this series, we're probably not going to get all the way through modeling a humanoid head. But hopefully we'll be able to get a good start on it. And to start off with, I want to emphasize that we're going to be talking about the box modeling, basically, or extrusion and face filling method of modeling here. You can sculpt a human head with a lot of accuracy, but the topology that's generated is not necessarily useful for animation, and it might be hard to apply a material to make something look correct and look convincing or believable. So we're going to try to take a proper topology approach to modeling here, and that's basically the emphasis of this is facial topology. So to start off with, my own disclaimer here is that I am not one of these people who has like the flow of topology around the face memorized. So I'm going to use a lot of cheats here, and you're going to be able to see all of them, so brace yourself a little bit. And to start off with, it's a good idea, I'm going to split out my window here, it's a good idea to establish a reference. So let's just open our image editor here, and there are a lot of really good references out there. This is Vincent, which is provided with a Blender Cloud subscription, and you can see on Vincent's head here, I just tabbed into edit mode on the model that you can download, and you can see on Vincent's head here that there is a good flow of loops around certain areas of his face. So you can find references really easily, and what I would recommend is finding a good reference and using that to create a very simple human body, or at least in this case, at least a face, a base mesh that you can add complexity and detail to anytime you want to make a character. So the object would be to keep it really simple. And I've actually done that before, and I created some reference images from that base mesh. So you can see that here. This is my base mesh that I use, and I've borrowed the color scheme from other just Google image searches that I've done, but basically this is a mesh that I created that is very, very simple. You can see there aren't as many vertices or faces, not as many polygons here as there are in Vincent. So this is not a production character, but this is a very basic, properly topologized mesh from which one could create a more complicated character. So I'll use this as a reference, and sometimes I'll even just use it as a full-on background image while I model. For the most part, though, since I actually have this character modeled now, I don't have to model faces anymore. I can just use this. But we're going to keep this up here and visible. I'm going to delete my default cube because I don't usually start with cubes on a facial mesh. To start, I'm going to bring in a reference image, and it's going to be my head model 1 image. And what I'm going to do is change the opacity of this image so that it's about, I'm going to say, let's start at about 1/3 opaque. And then I need to bring this into alignment with my axes. So I'm going to try to get the center axis, the Z axis here, right down the center of the model's face, and that's pretty good. So now let's bring in our side image. We're going to treat it the same way, take it down to about 1/3 of opacity, and I might move it back just a little. Now let's see if we can line these things up. So I'm going to create a plane and put that plane right on the bottom of the model's chin. And then I'm going to use the 6 key on my number pad to move around here so that I can select. I'll go into wireframe view so I can actually see the chin, or see the plane still. Okay, so the chin's pretty well lined up, pretty close. Now the eyes I can see are not quite lined up, so what I'm going to do here is select my plane and hit Shift S to put my, Shift S to put my cursor to selected, and you can see it's right smack in the middle there, and that actually is basically where it was anyway, so I didn't need to do that. But now I'm going to move my plane upward and put it right on the corner of her left eye, that outer corner there. And then I can select this other image. I can change my pivot point to the 3D cursor. I can scale this up so that the corner of her left eye meets there as well. Okay, and that should be about right. So now from a front view to a side view, you can see her eyes line up. So we've got her chin lined up, we've got her eyes lined up. That's probably about as well as we're going to be able to do, so I'm deleting that plane. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name my reference images. So empty is going to become reference dash front. Empty.001 will become reference dash side. Now I'm going to create a new collection. I'm going to call it reference. I'm going to place these objects both inside of that, and that's so that I'll be able to treat them as a group. I can hide or unhide my reference images all at once by hiding and unhiding this collection. The other thing I can do is I can go up to my little filters drop down, and I can enable the selectable filter, and I can turn these images so they're not selectable, so I'm not accidentally selecting them when I'm creating my topology here. Okay, so I have my background reference images. You'll notice something. People are not symmetrical. So you kind of have to pick a side here and decide which side of your model you're actually going to be modeling, and then stick with that side, since we're going to use a mirror modifier here. So if I go into my reference here, I can see, I like to start with the eyes. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 vertices surrounding that eye. So let's start there. I'm going to create a new object, Shift A. It's going to be a mesh object, and it's going to be a circle. And on that circle, I'm going to specify 11 vertices. Sorry, my screencast keys are kind of getting in the way there. And now if I look, you can see I created this circle here. So let's rotate that in X by 90 degrees, RX90. We'll kind of scale it down. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring it up in Z, but I haven't moved it in X or Y yet. I have rotated it in X, but I haven't moved it, and here's why. I'm going to add a mirror modifier to it, and then, this is very important, tab into edit mode. And in edit mode, I'm just selecting the geometry of all the object. It happens to be all of the object. Now if I move this to the side, moving the geometry, it's mirrored over here. The mirroring would follow the object, otherwise it wouldn't actually mirror around this original x-axis. Because when I move the geometry of an object in edit mode, I'm not moving its central pivot point, which is this little yellow or orange dot right here. So let's go to vertex select mode, and we'll just kind of try, we'll use our reference over here to kind of mirror the topology of what we're seeing here. So I can see 1, 2, and then a center, 3, 4, and then a corner, whoop, and then a corner, and then 1, and then a center, and then these two. Okay, and as you can see, we're not quite lining up on this side. I'm going to be modeling the models left, my right, And from here, I'm going to go to my side view and tap GY to kind of get this whole thing moved up to where the eye should be. I'll kind of have to consult a couple of different views here as I go. But basically, what I have to do here is figure out how to conform this shape, even though I can't see all of where the eye should be. I kind of have to do a little bit of guessing here. And I will not get it right the first time, that's for sure. As a wise man once said, start with the assumption that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. It helps to know that the eye is roughly spherical, so we can kind of wrap the eyelid around like a sphere like that. Okay, and that's less wrong at this point. So I'm going to select all, tap E and S to extrude and scale, and I can see I've created a problem. I'm going to undo that. Always undo if you cancel and extrude so that you destroy the new geometry that you created. You undo that. I'm still pivoting from the 3D cursor, so let's go back to the median point, which is the default, and tap E, S to extrude and scale. We'll go into a flat shaded viewport, and we'll just kind of start bringing this topology out here to sort of conform with the eyelid. You can see in here that we're going to give the eyelid 2 loops. We'll get there eventually. We don't necessarily need to get that granular at this point. Not quite. Okay, and let's see what that looks like from a side view. And that actually looks pretty decent. Probably need to do some tweaking as we go, but for the most part, I'm actually pretty happy with that. So we can actually, when we're ready for this inner loop, we can just Control R and do a loop cut in there to create that other loop. Okay, now I can see that in my reference here, we're going to have 3 loops for the brow area, the eye socket, and then 2 more faces before it joins in the center. So that's going to be fairly straightforward. I'll alt click to select the loop around the edge here and just do the same thing again. ES, and we'll kind of go big here and create our sort of large shape of the eye socket. I'll just kind of try to conform that to the eye socket of the model here. And I'm fortunate with this model, you can kind of see the structure of her face really well there. So that's working out to my favor. It's really fiddly, this whole process, but it's kind of cathartic. Okay, and I think we can loop cut that twice and consider that our 2 loops. We need 1 more loop to kind of approximate the brow and the top of the cheekbone, so we'll do this. Oh, you know what? Let's check how we're looking from a side view, and I can see that needs some work. That's not a very realistic. That shape is entirely too flat. Not a very realistic shape for a human eye socket. We tend to curve rather than be straight. Alright, and that's probably good enough for now. So let's alt click to select that outer loop, E and S to extrude and scale. And then we're going to kind of start making the brow here. Okay, and that's getting there. Let's see what that looks like. generally speaking, if a series of edges have started kind of a curve, that curve is usually going to kind of continue. There aren't a lot of sudden abrupt angle changes in the human form. So all right, now this is coming in way too much, but we'll have to deal with that in a minute. So now I'm going to come over to my mirror modifier and I'm going to turn on clipping, and that will allow me to select, for instance, an edge and just extrude it into the center. And this, of course, is going to start forming the nose. I can see that this will just extrude that single vertex there and tap F to fill it. And this is really shaped wrong, right? So we're going to actually come in here with this vertex, and we're going to drag it all the way forward, and that will give us a good hint as to where the rest of our topology between what we can see on the profile of the eyelid and what we can see on the profile of the nose, where the topology in between those points should kind of be. So we're going to just sort of bring that forward and kind of try to average it out a little bit. And I might turn on my proportional editing at this point. That allows me to scroll to determine how much influence, determine the radius of the influence of my transforms. That's kind of nice. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. That feels a little bit better. It's still not quite there, but we're a lot closer than we were a couple of minutes ago. So we'll keep coming back as we get more information. We'll keep fiddling with it and improving what we see. There we go. All right, that's actually looking better. So at this point, you can see that a simple extrusion here is not really going to do what we need to do. At this point, we've encountered what's called a pull, and that is to say that whereas with most intersections between quads, we're doing quad-based modeling here, most intersections at a vertex, the vertex has 4 edges touching it. 1, 2, 3, 4. But a pole has either 5 or sometimes they will have 3. Let me see if I can find an example of a 3. Okay, there's a 3. And what these do is they either split or combine the flows of loops. And so you can see we've got our loops here. These are very important loops. They have to be intact in order for this face to deform properly if we're animating it. So this pull right here is important because it allows the loop of the eye to separate its flow from the loop of the loop that goes from the bridge of the nose down under the lips. So we're going to create that pull now, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to select this one vertex and extrude it, and then extrude it toward the center, select all these vertices, and then just tap F. Alright, and now I'll select this pull, or sorry, this vertex and extrude it and do kind of the same thing. So I'm sort of drawing in 2D here. I'm just sort of drawing what I'm seeing. And of course from the side view, it's totally wrong. So I have to come over here and correct what's happening. But that starts to get us into the territory where we're going to create a proper flow of topology for this face. All right, and I can see now that this face should still extrude outward, or basically this face right here. I can select these and tap F to fill, and then we have another pole here. So we'll extrude this guy down. And there should be looks like there's a pole here as well. Okay, and that's where it starts getting kind of complicated. That's where these reference images come in really handy, because I can't keep track of this in my head. And I have to consult with these reference images more or less constantly. So let's go in and fix that from our side view. And I'm going to try to make these curves kind of flow with the cheeks. There we go. Okay, and that's looking a little bit better. But basically, that's my strategy for creating a human face, creating human topology. I start with a circle pretty much every time, and it's a good idea to just sort of get one of these things made and then keep it. Make it as simple as you can with as few loop cuts and subdivisions as you can possibly make it. And then when you need to create a humanoid character, you can just take that mesh and you can start distorting and moving things around and subdividing in order to create a different character. And you just do a save as and save the new character. You don't have to start from scratch every time, but it's really good to kind of know how to create that topology in the first place. So we'll just, before we go, we're going to complete one loop here. Oh, and I just messed up, didn't I? So I'm going to select these, merge vertices at last. There we go. That's why I keep a reference. Okay, now that loop will look absolutely awful from a side view. So we've got to go in and fix it. Okay, and that's a little bit better. And from there we would continue on. We'd make the nose, we'd make the mouth, and I hope that's helpful to get started with human topology. And good luck.